In November of 1973, production designer Joe Alves and mechanical effects artist Robert Matty were hired to build 3 sharks for the upcoming production of Jaws. Despite the well-documented issues with the mechanical shark, nicknamed Bruce by the film's director Steven Spielberg, the film would go on to break records at the box office, and the shark became an icon of modern cinema. In 1976, Universal Studios acquired screen-used elements from the film's art department to create the Jaws attraction as seen on their backlot tour. This is the story of one of those particular elements. In 1986, I took my first trip to Universal Studios, where I saw the biggest shark I had ever seen. Actually, it was the only shark I had ever seen, aside from the movie, which I watched at least once a day. 20 years later, I found out that that old plastic shark was hauled away to a junkyard. Apparently, Universal has a habit of throwing out very valuable cinematic antiquities, because as it turns out, I had actually been standing next to Bruce, the mechanical shark from Jaws. Greg Nicotero and KNB Effects restored Bruce to his former glory, and thankfully he is now hanging on the ceiling at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures in Los Angeles. Here we have Bruce's dorsal fin, along with about 7 or 8 feet at the back of the shark. This particular fin was used in the movie several times and ended up on the backlot as part of the Jaws attraction from 1976 on to about 1996. On some good advice from a friend of mine, I had the fin scanned, just in case I wrecked it or something. I don't know. It's pretty indestructible. I don't know how I could break it, but still, better to be safe than sorry. So the trouble with this thing is it's really, really massive. It's extremely hard to carry around. I can't store it anywhere. And it just costs a lot of money to make a mold of this thing. But it has to be done. There's a lot of technical aspects that are going to create some problems for us, but we're going to figure it out. So let's jump into it. I'm going to start out by drawing a form of the dorsal fin on some cardstock that's taped together here. I'm then going to cut that form out, and then I'm going to trace it on a piece of plywood. Next up, I'll take the plywood and I'll cut out the form. So once again, I'll repeat the process with the front of the dorsal fin. Cut it out in cardstock, trace it, and cut it out of plywood. It's a good thing OSHA's not around. So, as you can see here, we've taken the plywood silhouette that we've cut out of the dorsal fin, and we're going to attach it to one side of the dorsal fin, effectively splitting the fin in half right down the center. The wood will be on one side, and on the other, a perfect half for us to begin the mold. Now the next step, filling those gaps with clay. The reason you have to fill the gaps in the wood is when you make the mold, you don't want any of the silicone to leak out. So, effectively, the best way to do this is some oil-based clay. Now you want to make sure you don't use sulfur-based clay because that can react badly to the silicone. Now comes the tedious process of scraping out any excess clay because we just want the gap to be filled. I've tried many things to thin this clay, but the only thing that works is a bottle of Zip Kicker, which is used as an accelerator for super glue. I don't know, go figure. Here you can see the mold starting to take shape. We've now successfully separated one half of the dorsal fin from the other, and it's time to start making the mold. So now we're going to make some mold walls out of cardboard. Now the cardboard's pretty rigid, so what we're going to do is we're going to score the cardboard along the edge of this plywood here to make it nice and flexible. Why, you might ask? Because we're going to conform the shape of the cardboard to the outside edge of the fin. And I'm going to glue it in about 1.5 inches away from the fin itself. That way I've got a solid 1.5 inches of silicone around the edge. And here's the completed mold wall. Now, because this is a 2-part mold, I'm going to lay in some keys that I made out of clay. Pretty simple, just rolled out a piece of clay, cut it into strips, and just start popping them against the mold wall. That will keep the two halves from shifting. Okay, now it's time to pour. Lots and lots and lots of silicone on this mold. Ugh, I certainly hope it doesn't leak. On a few layers of silicone, I added some Cabasil to the mixture in order that the silicone stays put on the vertical sections of the fin and doesn't drip down. Well, not as much. Okay, so you've seen the clay keys, but now we're going to make some giant silicone keys. These I'm forming out of some 1/4 inch plywood. Notice the trapezoidal shape of the key molds. Nothing too fancy, just a basic shape. And as you can see, I've put down yet another layer of silicone. And I'll do another layer, and another layer after that. Oof, this is getting expensive. Now we're going to lay in the giant keys on the fin mold. We're putting them here so that the mold jacket that we end up forming over the silicone mold itself doesn't shift from side to side. And the way that you bond the keys onto silicone is just with more silicone. Now let's start laying in the fiberglass jacket. I'm doing a layer of fiberglass resin and Cabasil, again thickened up, just around the keys to make sure that the shape of the key fills out nice and clean. Now before we lay in the fiberglass for the mold jacket, I'm going to need to wax up this plywood because resin loves to stick to wood. And we don't want it to stick to this wood now, do we? Okay, the mold's all waxed. Now it's time to start layering in this fiberglass mat. I'll put in a total of 3 layers over the silicone mold. Just for a little bit more structure, I figured I would add in a couple of pieces of 2x4 on the mold jacket. You know, just in case. Okay, it's time to flip this guy over, and I can't do it by myself. It's a good thing I have Rancor Steve here to help me. I have to make sure that the shark fin is leveled out. That way I get the most out of my first silicone pour. And I see that Steve's happy with his work. Now it's time to pull off these plywood silhouette walls. You can see now why I used the wax. Now we'll take out those clay keys that we put in the wall, clean up the silicone a little bit, and we start the whole process over again. Here's the completed second side. And here is the completed mold, both sides together. Let's get this guy out of the mold. I'm going to grind off the edges here and smooth them out because I don't like fiberglass splinters, and neither would you, trust me. I'm going to drill holes in the mold flange here. You'll see why later. A little hammering, just a little bit, will break the seal. One of the hardest things to do is to break the suction between the fiberglass jacket and the silicone mold itself. It takes a little bit of time and a lot of patience. But as you can see, we get them apart successfully. And it looks like the master prop is undamaged. Whew. I gotta admit, it was a little bit stressful. Here are the two halves of the mold completed. Now it's time to make another Bruce fin. For the first layer, I'm going to use epoxy gel coat. This stuff is really good for catching all of the detail and is extremely strong. It's what they make motorcycle helmets out of, and boats. Next, just like the mold jacket, I'm going to layer in a bunch of fiberglass cloth. Now notice I'm only painting up to the very edge of the fin on the mold. There's a reason for that, and you'll see in just a little bit. Okay, both halves of the mold have been filled. Epoxy and 3 layers of fiberglass. Now it's time to put the mold halves together. And here we can see they are together. Now, the reason that I had to paint the epoxy just up to the edge of the mold was so the two halves could go together without any issue. Now you can see they perfectly fit together, and all I have to do is add some fiberglass on the seams on the inside. So now that it's been glassed together, it's time to take the fin out. Now remember those holes I drilled in the mold flange earlier? Well, those were for 1/4-inch bolts to hold the two mold halves together. It holds them perfectly in place. And here's our first casting. Not too shabby. A couple of imperfections, but nothing we can't handle. We'll trim away a little bit of the excess flashing on the bottom of the fin and sand some of the details. And now we're ready for some Bondo. Now we're going to sand the Bondo, but we don't want to sand too much of the detail off of the fin. It's got a shark skin texture on it, and I don't want to lose that detail. A really good tip for smoothing out any of your sanded Bondo is a little bit of acetone on a rag. All you have to do is just buff it out. Well, that wraps it up, guys. Here's the rest of my Jaws collection. Got some pretty nice stuff here. Thanks for watching, you guys. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope you enjoyed this video.